1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, rock.
Unlike previous Americans, those in the 1950s lived in a time when consumer values dominated the American economy and culture.
Like in Vonnegut's player piano, the economy expanded to meet peacetime needs. The 1950s provided a transition period from the chaos of World War II.
Large-scale expansion of the working middle class. There were strong unions comprising of half the American workforce, much like the Reeks and the Wrecks, like in player piano.
As in player piano, there was a desire for faster and more efficiently produced goods. The effects of this mass consumerism brought on material conformity.
Conformity in social areas such as religion and gender roles was the norm. American people wanted less of their government. They looked to Washington for reassurance rather than bold action. That's the 1950s.
If the 50s was all about material conformity, the 60s was so anti-material conformity. In the 60s, the dream changed from a nation growing to being the best that it could to all about being the individual. People fought against the social norm and decided that their American dream was going to be what they wanted it to be.
This new American dream was defined by through conspicuous consumption. People would go out and spend large amounts of money on goods and services to display their social wealth.
And although that sounds like it would work great for the American dream, and although the economy did start off on a high note in the early 60s, by the end of it, with everybody just doing whatever they wanted to, the economy did start to take a nosedive, which kind of almost killed the American dream.
This created a concept that money and possessions made life easier, when that's not necessarily the case.
The 1970s was a big turnaround compared to the two previous decades. The economic downturn almost snuffed out the American dream.
With an energy crisis and high unemployment, the 70s really messed up the American dream in America. People could no longer just buy the most ridiculous things they wanted to show that they were living. The American dream suffered greatly because people had to ration their money and what they bought.
The 70s was almost the death of the American dream, and the 80s brought it back to life in full force with the development of commercial TV, which allowed manufacturers to advertise their products to the masses across the United States. Just kind of fed right into the pocket of consumers.
Ronald Reagan, celebrating his recent election, spent $11 billion on balls and pageantry, saying glitter is back.
This new mindset created a rapid escalation of desire and need for commercial goods.
All these components together spurred the rise of consumerism in the 80s. During the 90s, the American dream continued its escalation that previously started in the 80s.
The economy was doing really well, and with low unemployment and people making more money than ever, the American dream seemed to be back in full swing. Once again, it was all about owning your own house, having the most flashy things, and just living life and having the good life in America. By the 90s, everybody was doing whatever they wanted to, buying whatever they wanted to, and living what they thought was the American dream. By the end of the 90s, we were still doing good, and we were looking good into the 2000s.
As the 2000s progressed, people began to grow more concerned with their economic future. People's top priorities became saving money rather than investing and spending.
With the steady decrease of the cash flow across the United States, our economy dipped into somewhat of a depression, recession, which we all experienced varying ways through job loss, cut of pay, etc., which only made the divide between rich and poor greater, which kind of emphasized the social class, social case.
The American dream, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Where will it go from here? The world may never know.
So in recap, the American dream started off in the 50s, doing great, 60s kind of went kind of crazy. Nosedives in the 70s. Came back up through the 80s, up through the 90s. 2000s kind of started going down again. The American dream's changed a lot ever since when it first came around. People today just seem to care about themselves and not about what anybody else cares to think about them, which makes you wonder if the American dream is the same way.
Let's go!
Alright.
You filming this?
Yeah.
I'm filming.
That's the random stuff.
Filming Montana.